Tithing is a commandment accepted by various churches in the Latter-day Saint movement in which adherents make willing tithe donations, usually 10% of their income, to the church. It is based on both the biblical practice of paying tithes and modern revelation given to Joseph Smith and his accepted successors. The adoption of tithing and fast offerings as the economic foundation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints marked a shift from the earlier communal period of the law of consecration. Origins in the movement. Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery made a covenant on November 29, 1834, in which they promised to give a tenth of all that they received to the poor in the church. However, during the early history of the Church of Christ, most Latter-day Saints understood the scriptural word tithing as any amount of consecrated goods or money. For example, in 1837, the presiding Bishop Edward Partridge and his counselors defined tithing as 2% of a household's annual net worth, while in Far West, Missouri, Smith received a revelation commanding his followers to build up a holy city Zion and construct another temple. Faced with the future financial burden that this commandment would create, Smith gathered several church leaders on July 8, 1838, and prayed to know how much property God required for tithing. The answer that Smith received is recorded in Doctrine and Covenants, which describes 3 types of tithing, including all the surplus property, all those who gather unto Zion shall be tithes, and 1/10 of all their interest annually. The revelation states that the original purpose of the surplus property was for the building of mine house, and for the laying of the foundation of Zion, and for the priesthood, and for the debts of the presidency of my church. Quote, additionally, it warned that if my people observe not this law, to keep it holy, behold, verily I say unto you, it shall not be a land of Zion unto you. After Smith received the revelation on tithing, he assigned Brigham Young to collect the saints' surplus property. Smith did not define the phrase surplus property, instead allowing the people to judge for themselves. In November 1841, the Quorum of the 12 stated that surplus property would mean 1/10. Modern scholars disagree on whether this original provision was only applicable under the law of consecration. After Joseph Smith's death and the resulting succession crisis, various factions of the Latter-day Saint movement developed their own tithing practices. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Historical and modern definitions. Brigham Young defined tithing as 10% of one's property upon conversion and then 10% of one's annual income. He also instituted an immigration tithe requiring 10% of one's net gross upon arrival in the state of Deseret. However, Young admitted that neither he nor anyone else had paid a full tithe as he interpreted the Doctrine and Covenants. John Taylor eliminated the immigration tithe on January 1, 1875. The LDS Church today teaches that tithing is 10% of one's annual income. It is left to each member to determine what constitutes income. History. During the Utah period of church history, tithing could be paid in various forms. Property tithing included all property that one owned upon time of conversion. This form of tithing was renewed in the September 1851 conference because of unsatisfactory returns. Labor tithing was a donation of every 10th day devoted for working on church projects. Tithing could be paid in its original form, such as in livestock, produce, or slaves. Donations in the form of United States currency, local scrip currency, or gold dust were also accepted. The LDS Church entered a debt crisis following the Panic of 1893. Lorenzo Snow became the church's president in 1898 and worked to solve the church's money problems. With tithing donations declining, Snow traveled to southern Utah in 1899 and urged members to pay a full tithing. He returned to Salt Lake City and continued preaching about its importance to church leaders, causing tithing revenues to increase. Church President Joseph F. Smith announced on January 10, 1907, that the church had paid off all its debts. In 1908, the first presidency and the presiding bishopric reformed the tithing process by deprecating the use of the church-issued scrip currency and shifting entirely to a cash-based system. During the early 1950s, the LDS Church launched a building program and soon entered another financial crisis. Deficit spending an annual amount of $32 million by the end of 1962. Apostle N. Eldon Tanner halted the church's building program in 1963 to build up a financial buffer reserve. At this time, church leaders worked to re-emphasize the principle of tithing, purpose and methods of collection. The LDS Church uses tithing funds for building and maintaining temples and meeting houses. It is also used to fund the church's missionary and education efforts. Tithing donations collected within the United States are sent to the LDS Church's headquarters in Salt Lake City. Funds collected outside the United States generally stay within their country of origin to avoid long shipping times and foreign exchange fees. In 2015, the church approved an online method for members in the United States to submit tithes and other offerings. Early church officers were paid from tithing money, the scriptural basis for this practice being, "He who is appointed to administer spiritual things, the same is worthy of his hire." In April 1896, the first presidency attempted to end salaries for anyone but the 12. Today, the LDS Church operates at the local level by an unpaid lay ministry. According to Gordon B. Hinckley, church general authorities today are given a living allowance taken from the church's business income. Tithing in interviews. Tithing settlement. During the Utah period of church history, tithing settlement interviews were annually scheduled on December 31st. Members would account their tithes to the bishop and tithing clerk. If the tithing donation amount was less than the expected amount, they were expected to explain how they would make up the deficit. An overpayment in tithing was carried over and deducted from the following year's expected amount. Today, the bishop or branch president schedules an annual tithing settlement meeting with each member of his ward or branch. In the interview, church members declare the status as tithe payers, and the leader records this on the membership records. Temple recommend worthiness. Tithes also play a role in temple recommend interviews. One's status as a tithe payer has been listed as a standard of temple worthiness since the Nauvoo Temple period. The handbook today requires bishops who interview members for temple recommends to ask members if they are full tithe payers, though provisions can be made if members promise to pay tithing at a later date. Community of Christ. New converts to the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints prepare an inventory to establish the net worth. Their initial tithing entails a tenth of this net worth, which can be paid at any time. Members then pay the tithing annually, calculated by taking the gross income, subtracting their basic living needs, and taking 10%. The Community of Christ defines tithing as offerings to support local, mission center, and worldwide church ministries. Such offerings may include 10% or more of one's income, though poorer members can give any desired amount. Church of Jesus Christ. Cutlerites do not practice the law of tithing and instead practice the United Order, the ideal of all things common taught in the early Latter-day Saint Church. Cutlerites do not believe that Joseph Smith ever authored the section of the Doctrine and Covenants that mandates tithing, claiming that it was never presented to the membership until after Smith's death. Church of Zion. The Church of Zion sought to reform Mormon tithing practices by basing it on one's annual accumulated income. When the principle was announced, the movement's founder William S. Godber stated that he hoped they eventually would not need a law of tithing.